In 2023, we saw amazing new cameras come out from Sony, like the A7C Mark II, the ZV-E1, which was one of my favorites, and the A6700, which surprised a lot of us that it had very similar features to the ZV-E1. But there's one camera that we expected to see that didn't quite make it, and that would be the ZV-E10 Mark II. So if this camera were to come out in the next year, what are some of the features that we could expect to see on this camera, and maybe some of the ones that might be a little disappointing that we still may see on the camera? But I want to go through my list of different things that we can kind of hope for and expect. And like I said, some of these things just might disappoint you, but let's dive in. Okay, so right up the rip, we got two different routes that Sony could take with this, and I'm hoping like it'll be obvious of which one that we obviously would want to see. So the first of these is the ZV-1 Mark II route, which is, I personally forgot this camera even came out this past year because it was very lackluster in what the updates were. It's like they added some things but took some things away. I don't know, maybe they gave the camera to Canon for a little while, and you know, Canon did their triple hammer magic on it, and that's where we're at with it. And it's not that it was a bad camera, but they took things away that made it less desirable. And so we could be running into that same issue with the ZV-E10 Mark II, unfortunately. For example, what if, because we don't maybe have IBIS in the camera or that in-body image stabilization, what if they took away the standard stabilization and you only had like active or off? Because that was the same issue with the ZV-1 Mark II, that they also had lens stabilization in that camera, but then it kind of got taken out. So it's like, what was the point? So that's the kind of stuff I'm hoping we don't see on the ZV-E10 Mark II, but that's an option for the one route that I hope we don't get. I hope we actually go the other way. And that would be in the route of the A6700 camera, which is a bee's knees Hall of Fame camera. And I'm very conflicted now after having used this camera for a couple weeks, and honestly, the footage from it looks amazing. The quality is amazing, and the features match my ZV-E1 camera that's full frame that costs about $800 more, but there's very little difference that I think most people would see on this. And that's what I hope the ZV-E10 Mark II kind of becomes. And this is the camera that I'm hoping that it models after. It used to be with the A6000 series. It was just kind of like a back burner kind of release where you would get some stuff, but otherwise the push was to move you to full frame, something like the A7 III when it came out. But then of course, a lot of people got the A7S Mark III when it came out. But now, thankfully, the A6000 series of cameras, at least starting with this one, aren't like that. We're seeing very comparable specs like 4K 120p, 4K 60p with no crop in it. Get a microphone, a headphone port, you get better battery, you get IBIS, you get the new digital type stabilization enhancements in there, and some of the new AI features and screen and touch screen and all this other stuff that this camera has. And that's the route that I hope they take with the ZV-E10 Mark II. So I want to go through my list of features, hopes that I want to see in this camera. No real order for this. Let's just get into those specific ones. So this right here is one of the first things that I hope that we get on the new ZV-E10 Mark II, and that is the sensor from the A6700. When the FX30 came out, you would have heard me screaming around the house like it was the Super Bowl, like my favorite team just won when the FX30 came out. So needless to say, this camera and the features were a big surprise to me. Now, compared to something like the ZV-E1 or A7S Mark III or FX3 for that matter, when you look at low light comparability, when you look at something like the IBIS and how well it works compared to something else, like I get it may not be the best that's on the market, but it is the best we've ever seen in the APS-C lineup. And let's not get it twisted, it is still really good, really great, and it's amazing. So I hope we get this sensor in this camera. The next up is a change to these touch menus that you see on the screen, that you can swipe them on or you can swipe them off. You can even bring up the quick function menu on the bottom of these. And I really like that this iteration has come to the new creator line of cameras. It is a really big difference between what you need when you're doing photography primarily, maybe a little bit of video, but mostly photos. And it's a totally different experience when you need to be a complete hybrid shooter. A lot of wedding videographers and filmmakers, they kind of have to do the half and half. Even like if you're doing real estate or something, those people need both. They need a good amount of photo and video, probably these days more video dominant than photo stuff, because honestly, photo hasn't changed that much over the last several years. So it needs to be up there and hitting where it needs to with the video stuff. But features like these on-screen swipeable touch options that you get access to on this camera, as well as the ZV-E1, the ZV-1 Mark II. I'm never talking about the ZV-1F, so let's just forget about that one. And then you have, hopefully this new ZV-E10 Mark II has the same things. But what I hope that we see change in this camera is the ability to customize these. There's like really great options on both of these cameras. You're not really missing any of the major things that you want, or the inability to add that to your My Menu options or add it to a custom button. And I know a lot of people were usually kind of frustrated that we don't see all the buttons, physical dials that you see like on this A6000 line of cameras, on the ZV line of cameras, but in real life use case scenarios, you're not missing them. You already are using most of the time like the same mode. So either your My Menu is getting the job done, your on-screen options are getting the job done, or the custom buttons are getting the job done, or the quick function options are like you have, like you're spoiled for options. So there's not a limitation in that way. It's just a different way about going about it. But it makes these on-screen options that much easier to use them effectively in the way that you actually create when you can customize them. And maybe it makes more sense software wise to like limit that so that you know that it's working right, I guess maybe while it's in these first couple cameras, because this is a brand new feature to market that we've seen. I think it was Fuji that did something like this maybe around the XT30 style of camera some years ago. So the fact that now it's coming to Sony and specifically for creators, there's a couple ones that aren't that helpful, and that's like the Cine vlog mode. Yes, this is cool, but this is something I think more of us are using probably not at all ever, or less and less than you think they probably are. It's fun, it's cool, and it does actually look pretty good. It doesn't like look terrible, but the thing is, I don't think we use it as much as Sony thinks that we might use it, or at least hope that we might use it. Another good one that we don't use a lot is like the soft skin effect. That's something that you either turn on and turn off, or you just leave it as is. Like for me, for example, like I have a lot of hyperpigmentation on my skin. So I'll put it on low because that looks normal and you can never really tell that it's actually on, whereas in like high mode, you start to look like a Barbie doll or something like that, like super plasticky skin. So this is something that either is on and always on in whatever the mode is, like low, or it's off. And that's not something that you need to or have to change regularly, because it's only soft skin for people. It's not going to necessarily soften something else like a dog or something. It might, but I don't think it would. Product showcase mode is the next feature I think we can expect to see. This was already on the ZV line of cameras, but it's actually not in the A6700 camera, which surprised a lot of people, including me, because we saw them make that market segmentation between hybrid-ish more cameras like the A6700 versus those that are more creator style like the ZV line of cameras. So I think we can expect to see this. I don't think that's anything we have to worry about missing on the camera. Here's 5 different ones I think we can expect to see that's coming from like the ZV-E1 A6700. Because we see it on both, I think it's a really good chance it should be on this camera. That's the AI auto reframing, the touchscreen, the ZV-E1 updated mics that are on the top of the camera, because we already seen variations of this already, the 4K 30 USB live streaming, and one of the coolest updates that was not talked about a lot, but actually does make a big deal, is the eye autofocus when you're using clear image zoom. So for example, I'm using my Sony 35mm f1.8 lens. That's an APS-C lens on my ZV-E1. In this environment, I still get very similar look to what it is on APS-C, but I can be closer to the camera, but not without having the vignetting on the side, unfortunately. But all I have to do is use the zoom rocker on the front of the camera, perfectly placed, that I hope we see. Well, I think that'll still be on the ZV-E10, so that's another one. But I just zoom into 1.2 times crop, but I don't lose my eye autofocus tracking for face or for humans or any of that, and it will do the face, the eye, the body, whatever it needs to, still in clear image zoom, which is extremely, extremely helpful. So I think all of these are things that we can expect to see, especially that 4K 30. I think Sony is really focused on, again, creator-centric features, and the 4K 30 out via HDMI and like USB is something I think we can expect to see. Now, this section is a biggie for me because this is all about the stabilization. I think we should see improved stabilization in the digital and hopefully IBIS. IBIS is a bit of that, depending on which route we take. Are we going to do the Bee's Knees Hall of Fame, or are we going to pull a ZV-1 Mark II kind of thing where it's just like, maybe, maybe not. It's a good chance the camera may not have IBIS, because if it has improved digital stabilization, so you have the standard, the active, and then hopefully, because again, market segmentation wise, this is that creator centric camera, it should have dynamic active stabilization. Now, if it has dynamic active stabilization, screw the IBIS. Like, it's not that big of a deal. It's not like life-changing. I'll put it that way. Is it nice to have? Do you always hope you have it? Yes. Is it life-changing? No. I would love to see some Olympus or whatever happened to the company. May the Lord bless you and keep you always, but OMS Digital or whatever it's called now, or Panasonic style IBIS on the camera. That's always the hope. And it has progressively gotten better and better over the years. But I do hope, really hope, we get dynamic active stabilization on the camera, but standard regardless, the standard digital stabilization. I hope that that's really improved, because if you remember on the ZV-1 Mark 1, the standard stabilization and the active stabilization did a much better job. I don't know if the lens stabilization in the ZV-1 Mark 1 had anything to do with that. Think about how most people would use a camera like the ZV-E10. They're using the original 10-18 f4 lens that has optical steady shot in it. So it has stabilization in it already. Now you couple that with standard stabilization that keeps you from having to worry about how well or how much you zoom in or out. If you're at 10 millimeters, you're constantly eating into that the more or the higher up you go into the digital stabilization. That being the case, I really hope we have improved standards. So dynamic active is great. And my hope with this is that if you are using the kit lens, like we've never seen an improved kit lens on the APS-C lineup, that's another kind of like honorable mention I hope we see. But the reason why this would be important is that if you have the 10-18, great. Or if you have the 10-20, great. But chances are, if you get any kind of lens other than that 10-18 OSS lens, it's not going to have stabilization in it. So if you have to default to dynamic active stabilization, if the camera does not have IBIS in it and you're reliant heavily on active or dynamic active stabilization, that's going to crop in quite a bit. So having IBIS would limit how much crop you have to do with digital and all this whatever combination of things. So it's just my hope that eventually we get it to the point to where it works really well. Now, this is one I feel like I'm gonna get on my soapbox a lot, but I save you the headache of it all. But I feel like these cameras should have a USB-C charger in the box. I am 100% on being eco-friendly. I'm 100% about caring about the environment. However, I do think there is a big line and a difference between where we stop being eco-friendly and it becomes more of a hindrance and an annoyance to the purchasers and the buyers of the product. Not having a wall charger, not having a little wall plug, which Sony has some of those, because I still have some over there on the table for my other Sony cameras. Not getting the manual in the box, like I get it, most people don't read those except for nerds like me, but we can get those online, no big deal. But not having a charger and a modern charger in the box, it's not that big of a deal. I think this could be easily fixed by having Sony partner with a company like B&H or like Ulanzi or whatever, make a creator bundle that is in the Sony box. We shouldn't have to only buy it from a B&H where they're doing it, which they probably will anyway, just because they already know how different brands operate. But my hope is that Sony does this, includes something like your own fan. Like if we get better specs on this camera, then it probably will run into some overheating issues. That's just the lane we're in right now, unfortunately. So throw in some kind of a fan or partner with Ulanzi to throw one in the box, throw in a USB-C charger, and throw in a cable, because not having that, that's again, good for the 4K 30 USB that the camera can do. Because sometimes if you plug it in, you'll get 720p 30 frames per second if the cable isn't strong enough, and you still have to buy something else that can do the 4K 30. It makes a huge difference to the creator experience when you can or cannot do something solely based on what you keep having to buy and add on, which we're already invested. That's the biggest thing. If you're invested in the brand, why not just have most of the basic needs in the box? And that still would be okay with being eco-friendly or whatever, you know, but it's a big line. And I think we've crossed over that line to being less helpful versus just only being eco-friendly. You know what I mean? I don't know. It could just be me, but again, I'm off my soapbox about it. Big one here, gotta have the Z battery. Gotta have the Z battery. FW50 battery should go on like the ZV-1 line of cameras, like just that. That's where the FW50 batteries belong, I think, present day. If we get like the 4K 120p, 4K 60, 10-bit or something, maybe, hopefully, I think 10-bit, we could hope to get it on this camera. I can't see a reason why not to, honestly. If the A6700 has it, very linearly is the ZV-E10 going to be compared to it. So I think it should have 10-bit on it. Maybe it doesn't have all of the features or something, but that's not been the behavior of Sony lately. So again, it just depends on what route. Is it going to be the ZV-1 Mark II kind of a route or the A6700 route? We go that A6700 route, we should get like 4K 120, at least 4K 60 with no crop, and then like bee's knees Hall of Fame features. So with all of that power coming out of the camera, we're going to need the Z battery. It's almost a non-negotiable at this point. If we go that ZV-1 Mark II route, we're probably going to see the FW50 battery again, which means they could do like they did when the A6400 came out. And if you compare the A6500 to the A6400, the battery life was way better. So they did do some magic and voodoo back there. But I hope that if it is an FW50, like they'd have to give you like an extra 30 minutes worth of recording times based of what they usually are in order for it to like not be an annoying creative experience. Worried about it, because always having to be tethered to a battery bank or an outlet or an AC power adapter, like thankfully Sony makes AC power adapters for the FW50. Don't do that for the Z batteries for whatever reason, but they should. So another honorable mention. I hope you guys throw in the box or something, or do make one. I don't know, do one. But I think at this point, with the features, the specs, and all of the amazing things we're thanking you for, we need the better battery life on this. We need the better battery life on this. These last two are things that I think would help enhance the creator experience overall. The micro HDMI port has been something that a lot of people complain about. So let's strengthen the port to make it a bit stronger so that it's not as breakable. I've never broken one on mine, but on any of my cameras, honestly, I don't care what the brand is. I've never broken the micro HDMI port. Now, the one thing that do get loose is like the headphone port on like older cameras that I've had, which has not been an issue, but like I have more issues with that than the micro HDMI, neither here nor there. The other thing that I hope that we get is a quieter preamp for the headphone port. I am so grateful. And if you watched my original ZV-E10 video when that was getting announced or rumored, I was ecstatic to have a headphone port, because it wasn't until you was into the $1,500 price range of cameras before you even saw that. So the fact now it's down to this $700, $800 price range. Thank you. I'm super grateful it's there. But if we're making improvements on the next iteration of the camera, let's just make it sound better, at least so that it's quieter. Because what you'll hear is a lot of extra environmental noise, where the noise floor in your ear is extremely high. But if you listen to it on a computer or something, it's not that high. Now, I know there's some probably bourgeoisie creator out there is going to say, oh, you bring an audio preamp with you. Audio should never be in the... Yeah, may the Lord bless you and keep you always. Anyway, when you're listening for feedback for what you have with you, which is your camera, and you're verifying that audio wherever it's coming from, knowing that the audio is actually clearer than what you're listening to is extremely helpful to the creator experience. End of point, end of story, like no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I just hope that that's something that we see. So those are some of the things that I would hope that this camera has when it actually does come to market. I think it's regardless going to be a great camera, but I just hope that the updates aren't only firmware based only things, but they're really things that enhance the creator experience. But if you're looking to choose between existing cameras on the market and you're looking at that cheaper ZV-E10 Mark I versus a camera like the Sony A6700, make sure you check out the video coming up on the screen right now, where we can dive right in right now.